I'm Dave Greenwood, and this is Overcoming Distractions. If you are an adult with ADHD, a busy professional, an entrepreneur, a high achiever, or just need some strategies to navigate your adult ADHD, you're in the right place. Who am I? I'm an entrepreneur with ADHD and the author of 2 books, Overcoming Distractions and Overcoming Burnout. I coach and mentor people just like you, and together we navigate the ups and downs of adult ADHD. From getting out of our own way to helping people just like you thrive in the workplace. That's what I do. Want more info on working with me? Hit overcomingdistractions.com. Ready? Let's get to today's podcast. All right, everybody, we're back. It is Overcoming Distractions. If you're that busy adult with ADHD, you're in the right place, as I always say. So we're talking, this was the kind of outreach I got from our guests, from chaotic brain to creative genius. And we're going to talk about how art can support your ADHD journey. And I think, there's never a one size fits all when it comes to creating an environment where those of us with ADHD can thrive. That's work, it's home, it's maybe a place where you create some type of mindfulness for yourself, which I'm a big fan of. And one aspect, we have talked about this a couple times here, is the power of art. And I know for many of you, you have to have that optimal environment where it's a place where, you can reflect. And I think that's mission critical for many of us. We got to have that place. I know for me, some of the basics are like a clean desk and not clutter around my chair, which if you saw this video, you'd know that I need to do a little cleaning. So let's just put it that way. So we're in a bit of a cleaning aspect here, but we're going to talk today about how art can be part of your journey in thriving as an adult with ADHD. We have Ellie Trier. She's the founder of Eleanor Trier Studios, where she mostly works with art, but other types of creative endeavors. She's going to tell us about that. And it's all in an effort to help those of us who maybe call ourselves neurodivergent. We're in that kind of category. And you got to check out the website because it's cool, it's bright, it's colorful, it's super inspiring, and we're going to have the link to that. So, Ellie, welcome. Tell us a little bit more about your endeavors, your mission with the art that you create and push out to the world.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. Yeah, well, like you say, I am primarily a painter, so primarily a visual artist. And I also dabble in writing and filmmaking and podcasting. And I'm sure it will come as no surprise to anybody else listening to this with ADHD that I have my fingers in lots of pies.
Us
And
multi-potential people, right?
absolutely. But the core that underpins everything that I do is talking about the sort of the experience of people who maybe are on the edges of society. So my core audience is made up of people like me who are neurodivergent. A lot of queer people come to me as well. A lot of the experiences kind of overlap for us. So I talk a lot about the experience of being an outsider and of not feeling like you quite fit in with the world and that kind of stuff. And through the process of doing that, one of the things that I've discovered in my research is that there is a scientific reason behind why the work that I do in particular, which is very kind of bright and vibrant and colorful, has a resonant effect with people who are ADHD or on the autism spectrum or have other kind of forms of neurodivergence.
When did you realize art was kind of your passion? Was it early? Was it something you kind of came into later in life? How did you know that was going to be your thing?
It's interesting actually, because when I was very little, I wanted to be an artist when I grew up. In fact, I started at the age of 6 my very first business, which was called Art Cloud, where I sold kind of paintings and things from a roadside stall outside our house.
Mm.
It lasted about a week. I didn't have a great deal of customers, but it was something that was very much kind of in my consciousness very early on. I then took a quite a long break from it, and went off and had a career in marketing and tourism, and then came back to it later in life, sort of in my early 30s. And I worked as a commercial artist for a while. Um, and then in the last kind of 2 years, I've really kind of come into being fully self-generated as an artist. And my job now is to find the people that resonate with the work that comes out of me naturally, rather than doing work kind of on commission and that sort of thing.
Do do people come to you and say, I need something for my office or my home that just kind of makes me feel like me, or they have a certain objective? What are the kind of conversations you have with people?
It's more that they find a piece that speaks to them. So a lot of my work is very kind of story driven. So there's sort of multiple layers to the way that people can experience the work. So on the more sort of superficial layer, that's like, oh, they see it, they like it, they buy it, they want to have it in their home. And then if they go a little bit deeper, there's the story layer. So this is where I'm really kind of talking about the experiences that inspired the work, and where that kind of what it is that I'm trying to express with the work. And a lot of people connect with the work on that level. Um, and then there's kind of the direct thing, but it tends to be that people sort of come in through the stories and then find a piece within that kind of framework that they decide is what they want for a particular place in their home.
Right, right. So we're talking about ADHD and maybe other uh, people that come into our neurodivergent world or universe. But I mean, do you think in general that those of us, because we're talking about art, which creates an environment, correct, to some extent?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, do you find that those of us with ADHD or some, you know, part of neurodivergence, we can focus better when we do have that right environment?
Absolutely. And I think, like, as you said at the beginning, like it varies wildly from person to person. And it's really about sort of understanding your own particular neurotype, your own preferences, what really kind of makes things work for you. So, for example, when I'm working on a particular project, a particular art project, the chaos and the sort of detritus that builds up around
Mm,
me as I'm working, I find intensely inspiring, and it really
mm,
kind of feeds into the project as I'm going along. It helps me make connections that I perhaps wouldn't make otherwise. It's absolutely fabulous, and I love it. And if I'm in the middle of a project, the studio is piled up to the rafters with stuff, and it's wonderful. As soon as that particular project is finished, it needs to be clean again. Like everything needs to be put away, everything needs to be scrubbed down, like everything needs to be reset. And the chaos from the previous project doesn't have the same effect on me when I'm going into a new project. Like it needs to be, I need to take this kind of tear down ritual every time. So that's the kind of the way it works for me. I know a lot of people with ADHD who can't think straight unless they have a tidy desk, which is something that you mentioned. But conversely, there are people who can't think straight unless they have their piles around them. And their piles may look like chaos to anyone else, like anyone who's coming in from the outside. But they're actually like, that's how they file stuff. They know exactly where everything is in every pile. If somebody moved the pile or like put something else on there, it would be, it would be chaos. So it really depends on how you prefer to work. And I think there's a particular aspect of neurodivergence. I come across this a lot when I'm talking with people in We have a particular relationship to objects, which neurotypical people don't tend to have.
Yeah.
So, particularly people who are more on the sort of the autism side of the spectrum, um, we have this relationship with objects, which is very sort of deep and meaningful. And I've heard this from a lot of my ADHD customers as well. I have a client, for example, who has one of my small pieces that she keeps on her desk. And it really is, it's become something of a talisman for her. It's a talismanic object. And she's imbued it with all of this kind of incredible power and every time she looks at it, she says when she has a difficult presentation to give, or she has something that requires her to be brave, like she's pitching or something like that, she can draw that power out from this piece, and she looks at it and she can feel, her shoulders straighten and
Yeah.
her breathing slows, and she's capable of doing that work now. It makes her braver. And I think being aware of how we interact with objects like that means that we have the power to sort of imbue them with certain properties. And when you combine that with the sort of the science behind it, when you understand the science behind it a little bit more, you can see how you can strategically use arts and other objects in your home, in your office, in your workplace, to put you into a different emotional state.
Hey, gang! Dave stepped out real quick to grab a cup of coffee, and if you know Dave, you know he doesn't even speak in the morning without a ton of coffee. So why don't you buy Dave his next cup of coffee? Go to buymeacoffee.com/overcomingd and get him that cup of coffee and support the show. Your support will help keep Dave awake and help keep those podcasts coming out on time. It's buymeacoffee.com/overcomingd. Okay, he's back.
You brought up something that, because I work individually with a lot of, we call it busy professionals with
Mm,
ADHD. They're in a demanding job. Maybe some of them, are in the C-suite. They're managing other people. Others are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. Many are involved in maybe large, long-term projects. But you mentioned something, and it's interesting how you said you have to kind of hit the reset button
mm.
after a project. Um, how critical is that? Because that's something that I talk about with people a lot, is that, let's talk about here's a 45-year-old person. They have a demanding job. They're going from project to project, and something as basic as just like pausing for 20 minutes, like in the morning before they talk to people or return an email, is something I'm astounded that many people don't do. They're like,
Mm.
I'm like, when did you just stop and kind of reset? And they're like, I can't remember. So it, did you find that that was like critical for you to kind of moving on to the next thing, or just getting your thoughts together? What does that do for you?
I think it's almost ritualistic in a way. It's an opportunity for me to sort of assess how things have gone and then decide if there's anything that I want to do differently in the future. I
Hmm.
think the sort of the act of tidying up in general is a very therapeutic one. Um, but it's something that I do kind of throughout my life. I'm also an entrepreneur. I also run a business where I sell my work.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, I started sort of baking a review process into the beginning and the end of my day, at the end of the week, the month, the quarter, the year. And it's been so incredibly beneficial for me just to have those moments of pause. Because if I don't have them, with my brain the way it is, I get so enthusiastic about the next thing that I can just go and go and go and go and go. And then before you know it, I'm completely burnt out. I've burnt through all of my energy. I'm repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And I'm sure, this will sound familiar to a lot of your listeners. Like it's a sort of a fail safe to have this ritual to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and that I continue to have capacity to do all of the things that I want to do.
So let's expand on that, because um, I would gather from many people, some type of art can be a form of mindfulness.
Mm.
There's this one kind of image of mindfulness in our society where it's you got to go sit up on top of a mountain and cross your legs and all that stuff. But what I think we need to understand is mindfulness is kind of what you make of it. It could be gardening, it could be it could be reading a book. So do you find that art in general can play a major role in some type of mindfulness for people, whether it's reflection or the calming colors or whatever it does?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, there's something about looking at art. There've been studies about this, neurological studies about how the vibrancy and the colorful, like complex art, it reduces cortisol in our brains. It increases serotonin. It of course gives us like hits of dopamine.
Yeah.
And it's comparable to like food and sex and all of the other sort of basic human needs, like the dopamine and the serotonin that we get from those things. So it plays a huge role, or it can play a huge role in emotional regulation, in stress reduction, in mindfulness. And the act of sitting and looking, like really looking at a piece of art is, I mean, it's the same kind of principle as looking at a candle flame is a famous kind of Buddhist meditation
Right. Yeah.
tool. But when you're looking at a piece of art, like there's more going on. And I find for me certainly, and for people with ADHD, like too little stimulation, just we zone out, we get bored, we're off to the next thing, we're fidgeting. But you want something that has enough going on to keep you occupied so that you spend time with it, and it has the opportunity to do all of this. There's another study which was done recently, actually, in the Netherlands, where they compared how people responded to original artworks in I can't remember which museum it was, Rijksmuseum maybe, compared to the kind of the museum print reproductions. And they found that the original artworks had actually more of an effect, and they were activating the part of the brain which deals with self-reflection.
Hmm. Wow.
So there's all this stuff kind of happening in your brain chemistry when you look at art, which is doing its job to kind of help regulate you and help bring you back to a mindful, regulated state.
Have you kind of dug into the science of that? I mean, have you kind of geeked out with it and studied that, or?
I'm in the process of doing that at the moment. Like I
Yeah.
discovered this recently because I was like, how is it that this is happening? Like what's actually going on here? And it's so exciting, like to think that, I mean, we process so much information every day, and of course, it's all having an impact on our bodies. You can tell by, I don't know, just the 24-hour news cycle that we have these days has a
Right.
huge impact. Even if we're not really aware that we're taking it in, it's still there. So being aware of kind of how these things are affecting our bodies and our minds means that we can actually kind of wrestle back some control over that and maybe steer ourselves into a sort of a healthier state of being.
Right. Yeah. So on the kind of other side of that, um, obviously, a big duh. We a lot of us have trouble focusing, depending on what's going on in our lives or our business or both, and there is the you know 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to ADHD and people in a career, whatever that may be, of just trying to focus and setting up that kind of ideal type of environment where we can focus. And I think some of it has to do with you know the boundaries we put up, because we're like, oh well, I keep getting emails or I keep getting phone calls, and those are things you can control. You can ignore
Mm.
them for a period of time. But I do also think that, again, that the right environment helps us focus. There's some people I talk to that you know they love sitting in a coffee shop, because they love the hum in the background. Me, I have to have complete silence. So so how does art contribute to that environment where somebody can actually just, you know, get their work done and focus and maybe kind of minimize those distractions?
Yeah. I think there's several things at play here. One of them is what we've just been talking about. It's so much easier to focus when you are regulated, when your nervous system is regulated, when you're not sort of full of what's it called, sympathetic charge, when your brain's not kind of firing 100 miles an hour on things that are not what you're supposed to be focusing on right
Right.
now.
Yeah.
So again, using art as a tool to help you get into an emotionally regulated state, which could be like 5 minutes of looking at your favorite painting, and that makes a huge difference. And another aspect to this is what I was saying about having the ability to sort of use objects for their talismanic powers, and for their being able to sort of imbue an object with a set of properties. So when you catch sight of that particular, ornament or painting that you've got on your desk or above your desk, it reminds you, it snaps you back into the present and reminds you of what it is that you're supposed to be doing. So it's almost
Yeah.
like a visual cue. I don't know if you do this, but for me, if I have something that I need to remember, I'll leave sort of visual cues around the house, like to otherwise out of sight, out of mind.
Oh, all the time. And you know, when I tell people in the house, I'm begging you, don't touch that.
Yeah, please don't tidy up after me. It's all important.
Yeah, I do think, however, as a side note, the problem that if we do not attend to that certain thing that we left out, it becomes part of the landscape. And then we just continue to walk by it. So there is a time frame of which we do have to act on the thing that we left in everybody's way.
Exactly. And that's where art can sort of counteract that, because if you've bought yourself a beautiful piece of art to perform that function for you, it's far less likely to just become, part of the landscape, and it's going to give you that just that little jolt every time you look at it.
Yeah. Are there other types of art, or what types of art, or are there certain colors or color schemes, so to speak? I know from my kind of heavy PR and marketing days where maybe um, an organization went through a rebrand. And I know the good branding companies, um, went to great detail to identify the colors of a logo. I mean, we talk about the logo and branding, but
Mm-hmm.
but what are you trying to, for example, I worked with a very large moving company for years. Moving is one of the most stressful things you can go through. So they went through great detail to find colors in the branding and the logo and other things that were relaxing to the eye, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So do you find that in your work where there is certain things that maybe achieve different goals for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a general rule of thumb, sort of warm colors are more active and cool colors are more passive. So warm colors are red, which is very activating, yellow, which is very energizing, and cool colors, blue is very calming, green is the color of nature. They often put green on hospital walls. Hospital interiors are often done in green because it has a calming effect. But I find often it can be a combination of colors that does the thing for you. There are these kind of universal rules, but ultimately, it's a very personal thing. And
Yeah.
you're going to find that some color combinations make you feel different things. And that's a deeply, deeply personal experience.
Yeah. Um, as we wrap up, I know you obviously create a lot of art. You sell your creativity and your art, and all those efforts go into that. But I also think there's some people that might want to maybe give this a shot themselves. Maybe they need some type of hobby, which I think a lot of people with ADHD need, because we work and we go home and we work and we go home, and and something to take our mind off of our work and everything else. So if somebody were to say, you know what, I'd love to like carve out a space in my home and maybe just try this, do you have some type of tips where people could get started in this that could kind of benefit them, knowing that they're ADHD and they want to kind of just, they need something to get away from the daily challenges of having ADHD? And
Oh yes, having a hobby is so important, and doing something creative is, oh, it's magic, you know. I mean, I love it so much I turned it into my job.
right,
But
yeah.
yeah, and I mean, it depends very much on sort of how involved you want to get. I would be wary of choosing something very complicated and then, you know, buying all of the tools and getting completely overwhelmed and never doing anything with
Well,
it.
it's like the guy who like he wants the golf, so he spends like $2,000 in new golf clubs and
And then never goes. Yeah.
right, yeah.
So I would say try and start simple. Pick something that really appeals to you, but even just like a small pad of paper and a little watercolor set can be, you know, a really great place to get started. Um, I know a lot of people get frustrated because they can't be good very well straight away.
Right.
Um, and a lovely way to counteract that is by just kind of getting involved with the colors and just kind of get lost in putting colors down next to each other and playing with color combinations and working in a very abstract way, because then it can be sort of anything that you want. And if you decide you like it, then hopefully that enthusiasm will carry you through into like learning more technique and that sort of thing.
Cool. So people, if you still don't want to paint or don't have time to paint, but you need some stuff to like set the environment, you gotta check out Ellie's website. So what is that website?
It's eleanortrierstudio.com.
Okay.
And if you go to eleanortrierstudio.com/keep in touch, the best thing to do there is to sign up for my emails. I send out a weekly newsletter which has all sorts of inspirations and behind the scenes, and it's sort of a welcome into my wonderful neurodivergent world. And then you can see like whenever I have new releases and that sort of thing as well. But have a rummage around the site, have a look at my collections. You can book a virtual studio visit with me, and I can take you through some work if you have something that something in particular that you want, or a place in your home that is crying out for some art. And I can point you in the right direction. We can have a lovely chat.
Awesome. And people, if you forgot that website already, like many of us do, our working memory is taxed today. Obviously that link is if you're listening to this, it's right there in the notes. So just go ahead and check that out. So thanks for connecting. Awesome conversation. I love to, we talk about to-do lists and a lot of stuff, and because it's a lot of people who listen to this podcast need help kind of just getting through their workload and everything else. But it's great to kind of add to that in this way. So thank you for adding to that conversation.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, always worth having a look at some alternative tools and see how powerful they can be.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time.